Bueno, bienvenidas, bienvenidos, bienvenidos todos.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to Welcome Change. This is a series of weekly meetings with social entrepreneurs and young change makers from all around the world who help us know revolutionary solutions to the big issues of our society. Our dream is that after today's conversation, you get to know better Francisco Quiñones and his project Mochacelis, who promote a new type of society, an inclusive society, including the transgender community. And also that maybe you can think of new questions that maybe you hadn't thought of before, and some lens to look at the world through a fullest range of colors. I think this is a great opportunity, Francisco, for all of us. My name is Ana Sanz de Mira. I am the mother of 4 girls. I'm Spanish, I live in Madrid, and I've been working in Ashoka for 10 years. Today's interview is very special to me since I am part of the LGBTQ plus movement, and struggling for their fundamental rights is very dear to me, and it is my passion. Before starting, I'd like to give you a couple of logistic points. For those of you who don't speak Spanish, you can access the simultaneous interpretation in English by clicking on the interpretation button at the lower corner of the screen, and you have to select English. And also, please send us your questions if you have any in the Q&A section below the screen. So in the second part of the conversation, we are trying to give answers to many of those questions. So let's start today. Francisco Quiñones is the co-founder of Mochacelis, the first popular transgender secondary school, and they try to address the education needs of this population. And today their work go much beyond that, and they try to address an integral development of this community with different initiatives, going from consulting with companies to editorials and creation of cooperatives. Now, my first question for Francisco would be, why a secondary school for the transgender students? Wouldn't it be preferable advocating for integration with the public education system? Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here. And going straight to your question, which is very frequent, I'd like to first say that Mochacelis is not an exclusive place for the transgender community. Any person who is older than 16-year-olds can finish their secondary studies in Mochacelis. Next, I'd like to point out that in Argentina, we have the privately managed education and also the publicly managed education. But then there's another range of management, which is where Mochacelis is included. This is a secular school where we also are including the gender approach and the diversity approach in its broader sense. So it is important to say that this school includes adults and adolescents. So we are working with the population who has been expelled from the traditional system because they didn't have this gender approach in their schools. So these people, this population was not, it didn't get to feel included in their processes. So we work for this to stop. So in the other end of our work, there's the work that we're doing with the childhood and the diversity during childhood. So answering this question implies to starting to explain why Mochacelis was created. It was created 10 years ago, and the goal was to heal the problems of this population who had been expelled from the traditional system. Thank you, Francisco. So this situation is not the ideal situation, right? Because the ideal situation would be for this type of schools not to be necessary. Yes, but this is not an exclusive school. Anyone can come here to finish their studies. Our initial idea was to think that it would be better Mochacelis not to be necessary, but today we think that we want this education model in every school. We want to have gender approach in all education spaces so that any person who studies can feel comfortable and not rejected, neglected, or violent against them by belonging to any one of the options in the gender spectrum. There are the cis persons, the transgender person, the gays, transvestite, etc. The range is really broad, and sometimes the traditional system do not include them. They are not named, and they're not taken into account. Francisco, is this situation particular of Argentina, or is it the same in the rest of the world? The problem is the same in all the world. In Argentina, in particular, we have a work which has been articulated through the public policies, like the egalitarian marriage, also the Labor Quota Act, all of which allow us to interconnect social associations and civil associations with the activism and the public policies, and in that way be able to build a more equal society and to think about a paradigm of diversity. So we can go forward in this sense so that everyone can exercise their rights beyond their gender identity or sexual orientation, which we all have. Of course, it is not something which is exclusive of this community. We all have a gender identity, which sometimes is in accordance with the one which was attributed when we were born, and sometimes not. In Argentina, we have the advantage that we can have this discussion and we can give this conversation. In other countries like Chile, Brazil, Costa Rica, Pakistan, they are taking this initiative and this perspective to work in education from with a gender approach. Luckily, we're having these replications, but of course, with each particularities in each place. Here we have the advantage of the public education, which in other countries, maybe it is under discussion right now. Let us help us visualize one day, a regular day in Mochacelis. How would it look like in Mochacelis, a regular day? This secondary school has its timetable, and it was designed thinking about the transgender community. Most of the population used to live within the prostitution labor market. So a specific timetable, a specific curricula was designed. So the curriculum and the studies in our school is developed during the afternoon. And in our classrooms, there's a full range of diversity in terms of age, gender, sexual orientation. There's a diversity of proposals and activisms. There is a lot of discussion going on. Maybe we can also get to know their new leaders and new change makers that may be able to create a change in their own communities and also as a whole. because one of the first degrees they receive is social development change maker, or and they have the common subjects which are common for all the schools, like maths, language, etc. So we abide to the traditional education laws and also the diversity laws in Argentina, and there are different paths for each student, where we point out a very wide diversity with different approaches. We enjoy working with the tension that is generated in this space, because we are the ones who are always talking about diversity, so we are not always thinking the same. There are differences and different points of view, but we are also always able to go forward. This is we also have the public library Loana Berkins. We have a dining room. We do have the labor market program and a full program of development to access different rights for the community. And among the subjects, there are also those who address the specific desires and wishes of the students. We ask them what they would like to learn about, the specific training that they would like to receive. So they have a specific set of hours where they can study that particular interest that they have. Some of them may go to theater classes, others would learn how to build jewelry. Some others would like to choose other workshops. All those workshops are included because they are connected with what they want and like in order to later be able to join the labor market. How many pupils have you had so far? We've grown a lot. We went from 30 students per course to almost 100 students per course after the pandemic. And this has to do with a work which was developed with the LGBT organizations for the Labor Quota Act, which was passed during the pandemic, which requires that at least 1% of the public companies have to include at least 1% of individuals from the transgender community in their jobs. So this has been a great incentive for the population for them to finish their studies, because they know that they will have the opportunity to get a job. That's so interesting. I think that when you export the model of Mochacelis, we have to point out the whole legal framework, which is key to it. Yes, when we started with this project, the Identity Gender Act was not even a reality. At that time, there were some minor crimes for which the transgender individuals were being arrested only for dressing the clothes of the other gender. And these individuals were arrested for many days, up to 30 days, only for the fact that they were using the clothes of the opposite sex. And this was only the decision of the police. So if you ever had your you were wearing lipstick or you had some different clothes, you could be arrested. So let's think that as our friend Loana Berkins tells it, who helped us build this space. She could add up to 5 years of her life going in and out of jail. So for her, it was impossible to sustain any kind of job or studies because of these situations of being arrested. I'm talking about the year 2005. At that time, not even her name was being respected. Her file today still bears the name who was assigned to her when she was born, which was not her name. And this is the same in the whole Latin America. And we have to point out that the average life expectancy of this population is around 35 years. This is a very this someone in the audience is saying that Argentina is a majority of Catholic population, and they are asking if you are finding any kind of allies in the Catholic movement. Yes, it has to do with this perspective. We have something to tell about Sister Monica in Neuquén. She had to argue about this matter, and she is building neighborhoods where the transgender community can access a home, because she was moved when a trans individual went to the church, and because they had always been neglected, and this sister received her and told her that she was going to listen to her, and one of the girls told her that her only wish was to have a bed where she could die in peace. And the sister was very moved, and she started a discussion within the church. Maybe in Argentina, because of the influence of the Pope, or who knows, maybe this is sometimes seen as a process that finds a lot of resistance within the church. But the social movements have been able to articulate all this, and we have to say that some parts in the country are still refusing to adopt the law. Some other questions, Francisco, from the audience is, do you see if there are more advanced societies as regards inclusion of this population? And if so, what do you think are those cultural regulations that make those societies more to be more evolutionary? We have to think about the dictatorship here first. I think that today we are starting to think about the fact that this population was being expelled. In Argentina, we had the opportunity to think of this process of the never again, el nunca más, where we as a society had the opportunity to review the history and review all the paradigms of society, of sexuality, identity. We had a story that allow us to think with this approach. I think there was a very key moment of a tradition with a very important work by this human rights organizations, which is characteristic of our country. But also this is being developed in other countries too. The Madres of Plaza de Mayo are a key organization here. And I think the possibility that Argentina had to discuss this as society, where the society was also responsible for the dictatorship, allow us to give this discussion. Maybe other countries haven't been able yet to do this historic revision of the participation of the society in this type of horrific situations. We are working on the historic healing because, as I was saying, those kinds of police actions continued after the dictatorship and went against the community, and we are working as a society to review all this. And now, Francisco, speaking about the Spain in Spain, where the draft for the gender self-determination law is very controversial in the right wing, but also in the feminist movement. There are many open debates in this space, but I'd love you to explain from your experience, for all those who may be wondering, is it necessary to have a law allowing a young person of 16 years old to decide upon their sex based only on their will without any evidence, not even the consent of their parents? And what if there were girls who wanted to change their gender due to the patriarchal society which rules the world? I would like you to explain from your point of view, why it is necessary to have a lay, to have an act like this. First, we have to think of the principles which allowed us to work in the self-determination law here. And also the concept of being centered around the adults. We have to think that every person has a gender identity. Also, it is important to think that there's something which is perhaps difficult to understand, but we have to make a difference between sex, genitality, and gender identity. We have to understand all these points as separate and not as it is today, that from the genitality, the destiny of each person is defined. Again, as I said before, the concept of adult-centered, that when we see that there is someone who has the power to decide upon the destiny of others. And also we have to understand that gender is something fluid, that is something which is being constantly built along our lives. If we meet a group of people, not all of them are going to understand their identity in the same sense. They are going to build them according to their personal feelings. So this kind of thinking about how each one of us should be thinking of themselves is a complex concept where all of us are constantly confirming and building our identity, even the cis persons. I think these kind of thoughts are centered around the cis identity. We follow a rule, a norm, and nobody is questioning it. But let's put the question the other way around. Is a person of 16 years old prepared to decide if they want to be a cis person? Nobody would ask that question, right? So everyone is building and unbuilding and reconfirming our identity all the way. Nobody is questioning whether someone has or has not has to be a mother or not, whether someone has to wear certain types of clothes. That kind of decision is made if the market or the society is telling us how we should be, what we should be feeling, and who we should be. So we think that the transgender is incorrect and the cis is correct, but nobody is questioning it. That's a long debate. I think that it deserves that all voices be heard, especially the transgender voices. I've been in many interviews like this, and I've never found so many questions from the audience as today. I wanted to ask a couple of more questions first. One is about the companies. Are you developing a methodology for for including this community in the employment market? And can you give us a couple of examples in order to inspire other countries and other places? Yes, of course. We have many ways to work and articulate this, because from Mochacelis we think that this started as a school, but today it is a civil association which addresses in an integral way these education processes, employment processes, health processes, in all senses, going hand in hand with the lives of the transgender people. We have Maria Letieri in the program of transgender employment, where we concentrate the profiles of the different transgender persons, and we try to connect them with the different countries, with the different companies in their jobs. We also provide training for companies who are going to hire transgender workers, because sometimes they don't really know how to relate with them, or they have doubts. So we conduct these trainings in order to improve the labor climate in these companies. And also we have our own training programs for the transgender community to have more tools when they are looking for a job. We have one subject in our school which specifically addresses this topic by acknowledging the needs of the person, and also a projection by which this individual would like to go into the labor market. And we go during the whole process from the beginning to end until each individual is incorporated into a company. Are there any type of companies who today are being real models to this? Today we've had many good experiences, from law firms to textile manufacturing companies, and also food companies, technology companies who are hiring transgender individuals to their companies. And we've been able to develop, for example, with American Express, we are conducting a digital education program with the possibility to include the population. Also in the tourism market, the possibilities are endless. There is not one in particular, because the development works with the desire of each individual in the population, and it does away with the stigmatization of the transgender community only working with as a hairdresser or as a prostitute. And it also happened to me when I started working with this population many years ago. And I understood that we have to break and do away with all those prejudices. Maybe we can find a cis person who does not match a certain profile in a company, and maybe there's a transgender person who does. I'd like to read another question from India. How do you face the legal challenges when the family themselves and the society itself does not include and accept a transgender child? I would like to repeat that here we have this legal advantage of having the laws which allow us to think of this self-determination and move away from this adult-centered principle, and thinking that children have the right to be heard, and identity and childhood. Identity in childhood is one of the main rights. So here we have the laws. We also have certain tensions and discussions going on, but we have the law of gender identity, which I suggest you should find it interesting to read and know about. And it says that if any of their parents are not in agreement with the desire of the child has the right to have a lawyer to assist them. There's a lot of documentation regarding this topic, saying that there's a conception, an understanding that from the age of 4 or 5, there are children who do not feel identified with the sex they were assigned when they were born, which is associated with a lot of preconcepts and prejudices of what a man or a woman has to be or not. So we have to start listening the needs of childhood. We've done it too, and we've changed throughout history. I belong to the LGBT community, and when I was 5 years old, I wanted to marry a woman. Afterwards, I made the transition and I was able to discover my sexuality. But at the beginning, it was assigned to me because the environment was telling me, when are you going to have a girlfriend? When are you going to get married? All these social impositions that sometimes we don't get the opportunity to really understand that they are impositions, that this is ideology, gender ideology. I think that all the social, cultural impositions, the advertisements that are all the time building the concept of how a child has to be or has not to be. And instead, if we start listening and hearing what the childs are saying, they want to build their identity from some other place. We hope that conversations like today, we can keep having them in the future in order to do away with all the prejudices who are not contributing to the society. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all of you, for the audience to be with us today. And something very important is that we are keep looking for social entrepreneurs like Francisco and many others who have innovative solutions to social problems. So if after this conversation you have names, please contact us, contact Ashoka, and let us know, because the network has to keep growing, and we especially need to include those of you who address diversity in all its form. We'll send you the recording of today's meeting if you want to share it. Please join the next meetings also. You can have a look at the link in the chat, and have a great day today. And let's remember that the world will be better if we get to look at it through a wider range of colors.